I went up to the forbidden third floor. The house was silent. Too silent. Then I saw the chairs. Identical. Miniature. Both still rocking. But the horror wasn't the movement. It was what soaked the wood. Something dark. Something viscous. And before I could scream, the matriarch whispered, her breath cold on my neck. You came for a story. Now you are the final chapter. They say every town keeps one secret. Ours kept two. And they lived behind the Hawthorne door. When they introduced me, the matriarch smiled like a locked box. Her name was Eleanor Hawthorne, and the house answered to her before it did to weather. The estate sat under maples and fog. A Victorian silhouette children dared each other to touch and never did. I came as a nurse for the summer, a job, a room, a wage. I did not come to inherit rules I could not read. She sat me in the parlor, folded her hands, and said plainly, "We don't speak." The sentence landed like a law. Conversation folded inward. Plates were set, smiles became rehearsed. The twins were not mentioned, and in that omission the house grew taller. The household moved like a single organism. Eleanor's son, Precise Thomas, spoke careful sentences and never met my eyes. Rose kept the rooms in order as if order could hide a hole. The twins, always the invisible axis, never ate at the table, never laughed in the garden, never had portraits on the wall. When a neighbor asked once, the family inhaled together and someone said, with a softness like a knife, "We do not speak of the twins." A lullaby threaded through rooms at odd hours, half remembered, the kind that smells faintly of starch in a church pew. At night I heard two small knocks, polite, patient, at the nursery door, then silence like a tide pulling away. On the second night, a folded scrap waited on my nightstand, childish handwriting. Don't listen when she whispers. I might have burned it, but I kept it pressed to my palm until it warmed and my pulse matched its tempo. At dawn, I found two circles chalked low on the nursery door, joined like a figure 8 and a small line beneath, a child's shorthand for twins. When I asked Rose about the nursery, she said mine closed. For reasons of health, her smile did not reach her eyes. While folding linens in the attic, I found a tiny leather shoe sewn into a blanket's hem, perfectly stitched as if hidden. When I showed Thomas, his face blanched, then closed, the way a ledger does when someone writes a debt you cannot pay. Old things, he said. Family keeps old things. That night the matriarch stopped me at the attic landing and said, in a voice like a closed casket, "A house remembers what its children forget. You must learn not to ask." I slept with my clothes on and the lullaby under my pillow. On the 7th night, I followed the lullaby. In the nursery, two small cradles faced one another in a perfect ritual circle. Rocking horses were angled inward. At the center lay a small brass bell, dull with age. When I lifted it, the bell sounded hollow and long, not a ring but something that measured distance. Bell toll, long reverberant. I hid the bell under my pillow for 2 nights. On the 3rd morning it was gone. On the sill, a smear of tiny fingerprints, and on the wind, a whisper that smelled of starch and river mud. We remember. That was the last time the matriarch did not smile. The nights grew heavier after the bell vanished. The house breathed differently, like it had lungs again. Every corner seemed to hum with that same dull note I'd heard from the bell, only now, it came from beneath the floorboards. I told the matriarch about the sound. She didn't look at me. She just whispered, "You shouldn't have listened." That night I found her sitting in the hallway, holding a candle, her lips trembling as if repeating something silently. When I called her name, she blew out the flame. Darkness swallowed her whole. By morning, strange things began happening. The nursery door, which I always kept locked, stood wide open, the cradles swaying though there was no wind. And on the wall appeared faint handprints, 2 small identical ones, pressed into the wallpaper like it was soft clay. Each night, new prints appeared lower, crawling toward the basement door. On the 4th night, I followed the sound again, the tolling hum now rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing underground. The wooden steps to the cellar groaned as if someone waited below. A chill crawled up my spine as I heard 2 voices singing the same lullaby, but one was slower, distorted, almost gasping between the lines. When I reached the bottom, I saw something gleaming in the dirt, the brass bell. It was perfectly clean, and beside it, 2 little sets of footprints leading deeper into the dark. Suddenly, a door I never noticed before creaked open on its own, a narrow passage carved through stone. Inside hung portraits of the matriarch, dozens of them, each older, each sadder. But in every painting, behind her chair, two faint silhouettes stood, the twins, and under one cracked frame a phrase etched into the wall. She tried to keep us quiet. When I came out of the cellar, the matriarch was already waiting in the corridor, still cold, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles looked white as bone. She said, "You shouldn't have gone there. Now they'll know you remember." Her voice cracked, not with anger but fear. I asked her what happened to the twins. She didn't answer. She just said one word, "Beneath." That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every flicker of the candle felt alive. Then I saw movement through the nursery door. The rocking horses moving, slow and steady, like invisible hands were guiding them. A faint giggle echoed, followed by a whisper that chilled my blood. "Come play where we sleep." I followed the sound again, but this time, it didn't lead downstairs. It led behind the nursery wall. I pushed the old wardrobe aside, and behind it I found a sealed wooden panel. When I pressed my ear to it, I heard breathing. Two of them, fast, uneven, like children trying not to cry. I tore at the paneling until my fingers bled, until finally the wood cracked and the stench hit me. Rotten river water. Inside the hollow space were two tiny beds made of straw, a rusted toy bell, and children's clothes, half decayed, half soaked. Pinned to the wall above them was a note written in the matriarch's hand. They were born wrong. The river wanted them back. I stumbled back, heart pounding, as footsteps echoed behind me. The matriarch stood there, her eyes wet with rage and regret. "They wouldn't stop crying," she said. "They called me mother, but they weren't mine." She lifted her trembling hand toward the space and whispered. "They kept coming back even after the flood." And before I could speak, the nursery door slammed shut on its own. That night I locked my door, but the lullaby came through the walls again. Softer this time, almost kind. It wasn't just a song, it was a summoning. The brass bell I had hidden under my pillow began to ring, and slow, deliberate, each chime pulsing like a heartbeat. I reached for it, but it moved on its own, sliding across the floor, rolling toward the nursery door, like something unseen was pulling it by an invisible thread. I followed. The corridor felt endless. The portraits on the wall seemed to turn their faces toward me, their painted eyes wet and human. The closer I got to the nursery, the colder the air became, and the faint giggles of the twins grew louder. Inside, the cradles were rocking again, empty, but on the floor lay two wet footprints, small, bare, and facing me. Then a second set appeared beside them, each step forming in dust as if someone invisible was walking toward me. I whispered, "Who are you?" And the answer came in two voices, perfectly in sync. "We are what she buried." The rocking horses began to move violently, their wooden hooves cracking the floorboards. The mirror on the wall rippled, like water disturbed by a hand. And in that reflection I saw them, two pale children, eyes black and hollow, standing behind me. I turned, but they were gone. Only the mirror showed their reflection, closer now, smiling. I stumbled back, and that's when I saw the matriarch. She was on her knees, clutching the bell, her face covered in tears. "They found their names," she whispered. "I told you not to speak of them. You brought them back." The walls of the nursery began to bleed, dark, sticky rivulets tracing down the wallpaper. The air smelled of mud and river water again, and in the distance thunder rolled. But it wasn't thunder. It was laughter, children's laughter. When I finally opened the old wooden chest in the basement, the smell of rot and old paper filled the air. Inside I found a stack of newspapers, yellowed, brittle, forgotten. The headline on the top one made my heart drop. "Twin infants found dead in family estate fire. Mother missing." The date was from 1957. I flipped through more, police reports, faded photographs, and then a letter. It was written by the matriarch herself. Her handwriting trembled across the page. I had to do it. They weren't mine anymore. The twins were born wrong. They spoke to things that weren't there. They laughed at night when no one was in the room. The priest said they were touched by something dark. I tried to save them, but the voices wouldn't stop. Tears blurred my vision. The matriarch, the sweet old woman everyone feared, hadn't just lost her grandchildren. She had killed them. That's why the family never spoke of the twins. That's why every time someone mentioned their names, she'd whisper prayers under her breath. I suddenly felt the cold air shift behind me. 2 small shadows stretched across the basement floor. And then faintly I heard 2 voices whisper, "Grandma said you'd find us someday." The candle flickered, and the door slammed shut. The silence of that house had always felt heavy, but now I knew why. The matriarch's final words echoed in my head. "We don't speak of the twins, because they never left." I went back to the cellar that night, drawn by something between fear and destiny. The old wooden door creaked open again, and the air smelled like rot and old candles. My flashlight flickered over the damp stone walls, until I saw something carved deep into the bricks. 2 names, Eleanor and Ruth, the twins, but underneath their names was a third. Daniel, my name. That moment froze my heart. I wasn't an outsider digging into a mystery, I was part of it. My great-grandmother had been the 3rd child, the one they said died at birth. She escaped, changed her name, and I was her bloodline. Suddenly I heard the sound again, giggling, faint but close. 2 small shadows stood at the end of the hallway, their faces pale, eyes black and hollow, smiling in the dark. They whispered in unison, "Welcome home, brother." Then the lights went out. When I woke up, it was morning, but everything in that house was clean, no dust, no webs, no cracks, as if time itself had reset. On the table lay an old family photo, and there I was, standing beside the twins, smiling. The picture wasn't old. It was new, and at the bottom a caption written in ink. "The family is complete again.